Hi everyone, today is part 2 of chapter 8. To quickly remind you where we left off, we had a market for used cars that consisted of two parties. There were buyers and sellers of used cars. Both parties got utility out of two things, cars and other stuff. And the only thing that distinguished buyers and sellers in this market was how much utility they got out of used cars. Okay, here's something I did not tell you last class. We're going to assume that there's a scale of car quality that runs from 0 to 100, and the cars in the market are uniformly distributed on the scale. We're further going to assume that both buyers and sellers know of this distribution. Okay, there's still information asymmetry, so buyers can't look at a particular car and say, I know that car has a quality of 100, but in a general sense, they do know that a uniform distribution exists. First of all, what is a uniform distribution? A uniform distribution means that however many cars there are that have a quality of 0, that's how many cars there are that have a quality of 1 and of 2 and of all the way up to 100. So in other words, if you plot the frequency at each quality level, then what you'll get is a distribution that looks like a box. And the reason is because if you look at a box, the height is the same all the way across it. Okay, what a uniform distribution of used cars along the quality scale means for us is that if you're a buyer who's shopping around for a used car and all of the cars look identical to you because you're missing information on the quality of the cars, then if you just pick one of the cars that's available for sale at random, then you're no more likely to get a car that's worth 0 than you are to get a car that's worth 50 or 60 or 100. Okay, now let's think about the price. If we are in a world with perfect information, and we're not, but we're just going to assume this for contradiction purposes, then what would be true with perfect information is that each car would sell at a price that's proportional to its quality. Okay, here we have asymmetric information. So buyers have no information about the quality of particular cars. All the cars in the market are absolutely indistinguishable to the buyers. So because of this, the cars on this market will all share a single price because when there's asymmetric information, goods of varying quality levels that otherwise would be in separate markets all just get lumped together in a single market with a single price P. Okay, recall from last lecture that I basically told you how this whole thing was going to play out. In a nutshell, what happens is the owners of cars that are worth more than the price withdraw their cars from the market. The savvy consumers realize that the only cars that are left for sale are the cars that are worth the price or less than that. So chances are, if one of these buyers of used cars buys a car, they're going to get ripped off. And so because of that, they'll just refuse to participate in the market and not buy any cars. And when this happens, the market entirely unravels. Okay, now I'm going to walk you through the math that underpins that general story. First of all, go back to the utility function of sellers and think about what condition would need to be satisfied for a seller to be willing to sell one of his cars. Well, what he would need is for his utility to either go up or at least remain the same after the sale. So we could say that his after-sale utility minus his before-sale utility would need to be greater than or equal to 0, which is just another way of saying that his change in utility would need to be greater than or equal to 0. We can figure out what both his after-sale and before-sale utility are. After the sale, the seller's utility is just going to be his original utility minus the quality of the car he gives up, and we'll just call this car 1, plus the price that he gets. Okay, before the sale, his utility is just his original utility function. So if we subtract, we see that the change in utility for the seller is equal to P minus X1. And this should be intuitive. The idea is that his utility goes down by the quality of the car he gives up, and simultaneously it goes up by the price that he brings in for the car that he sold. Okay, if that whole difference, again, is greater than or equal to 0, then that means the seller should sell his car. And when we rearrange terms, we see then that he should sell his car, or in other words, he should place his car on the market if the market price is greater than or equal to the quality of his car. Okay, if every used car seller goes through this same exercise in their mind, then just think about how this would affect the distribution of used cars that are available for sale. All the cars in the market whose quality is above the market price would not be offered for sale. On the other hand, all the cars whose quality is equal to the market price or below that, they would be offered for sale. And this is exactly what we predicted just based on intuition. And just so you can line this up with the vocabulary, this is an example of adverse selection, because the high-quality cars left the market, and the cars that stayed on the market were the ones that are kind of crummy. Okay, now let's go over to the buyer side. The next question to think about is, when would buyers be willing to purchase one of the cars that's available for sale? Well, a buyer would be willing to purchase one of the available cars if it caused their utility to either go up or at least remain the same. So we can calculate the change in utility for a buyer if they buy. And basically, we're going to do the same thing that we did on the other side of the market, where we subtract the after-sale utility and the before-sale utility. However, when you try to go through the math, there's a catch. And the catch is that the buyer doesn't know his after-sale utility on the outset of this, because his after-sale utility depends on the quality of the car that he gets, but he doesn't have information about car's quality on the outset of this. So what we're going to do is, in the place of the quality of the car he would buy, we're going to plug in the expected quality of the car that he would buy. And for the buyer, his extra car would be his N+1 car. Okay, once we plug in the expected quality of the car, then with that we can calculate the buyer's expected change in utility, and then we can simply require that the buyer's expected change in utility be greater than or equal to 0. Well, what we eventually get is that the expected change in utility for the buyer, who likes each unit of car quality at a level of 3/2, would be 3/2 times the expected quality of the car he would be purchasing minus the price. When we set that greater than or equal to 0, we get 3/2 the expected quality of this additional car needs to be greater than or equal to the market price in order for the buyer to wish to buy one of these cars. Okay, so we need to plug in something for the expected quality of car N+1, and here's where we can use a simple trick. If you look at the distribution of used cars that are available for sale, well, if that distribution is uniform, then what that means is that the buyer should expect to get a car whose quality is in the middle of the distribution of available cars. Okay, the midpoint amongst the available cars is equivalent to 0 plus the price divided by 2. So we'll just take 0 plus the price divided by 2 and plug that in for the expected quality of this additional N+1 car. With that, we've got something to work with. So the new condition now becomes 3/4 the price needs to be greater than or equal to the price. Okay, think about what I just said. It's absolutely impossible for that ever to be satisfied. You cannot take 3/4 of one thing and ever make it greater than or equal to one of that thing. So what this means is the impossibility of satisfying that inequality suggests that there is no market price for which buyers would be willing to purchase one of the available cars. That means we don't have a market because buyers aren't buying anything. Okay, now let's translate this all over to health insurance. Recall that Akerlof set up this market, and he told the story of what would go on if we were selling used cars, because the used car market exhibits asymmetric information, and the used car market is a little bit more understandable than the health insurance market, which also exhibits asymmetric information. So let me draw the parallels for you between the used car market and the health insurance market. In the health insurance market, used cars play the role of customers' bodies. So the reason this is true is because both the used cars and customers' bodies are the things that come in varying quality levels. So some people's health is good, they've got high quality bodies. Some people's health is bad, they have low quality bodies. And what's also true is for both used cars and customers' bodies or our health, there's not symmetric information on either side of the market. In the case of used cars, the sellers know more about the quality of the cars than the buyers. And in the health insurance market, the people who are looking to buy insurance know more about their health than the insurance companies do. Okay, because of this, what we can also say is that the used car sellers play the role of health insurance customers. So again, this is the side of the market that has the information. They know the quality of their fill in the blank. Finally, the used car buyers play the role of insurance companies. This is because this is the side of the market that doesn't know on the outset what the quality of the car/body is. And it's only after a transaction happens that this side of the market understands what the true quality is. Okay, here's how things are going to work. We're going to assume each health insurance customer has an expected amount of healthcare costs over the course of a year, and we're going to call this X. So similar to before, X is going to stand for kind of the quality of, in this case, a person's body or their health. An insurance company is going to sell a single policy with an annual premium of P, and this full insurance policy will cover all healthcare costs that are incurred during the year. We're going to say that consumers or health insurance customers are risk neutral. So that means a person will only purchase insurance if the premium is less than their expected annual healthcare costs. The insurance company is not allowed to discriminate between healthy and sick customers. So in other words, they have to sell a contract to anyone who's willing to pay the universal premium. And then the last thing we're going to say is we're going to set things up such that expected healthcare costs are distributed independently and uniformly in the population. We've already talked about a uniform distribution. What does it mean that healthcare costs are independently distributed? That just means one person's healthcare costs do not affect another person's healthcare costs. So in other words, there's no contagious healthcare costs. We're going to arbitrarily say that the sickest person in this population has an expected healthcare cost of $20,000, and the healthiest person in this population, we're going to say, has an expected healthcare cost of $0. Okay, here are the parallels. Just as a high-quality used car used to be worth a high price, a high-quality body will now be worth a low insurance premium, because low insurance premiums should be given to people who are healthy and aren't going to go to the hospital and rack up very many medical bills. Furthermore, just as high-quality cars left the market when a universal price was set, high-quality bodies will now leave the insurance market when a universal premium is set. Okay, here's a demonstration. Suppose an insurance company offers a contract with a premium of $10,000. What's going to happen? Well, half of the people won't buy this insurance because their expected healthcare costs are less than $10,000. So you can put yourselves in the shoes of someone whose expected healthcare costs are nothing. Why would that person buy insurance for $10,000? Similarly, if you have expected healthcare costs of $8,000, it makes no sense for you to buy insurance for $10,000 because it would be cheaper for you to just pay your medical bills out of pocket. Okay, because of this, everyone whose expected healthcare costs are at or below the premium will choose not to buy health insurance. But on the other hand, if you expect to have healthcare costs that exceed the premium, which in this case we're saying is $10,000, then you're definitely going to want to buy insurance because insurance would be cheaper than what you would expect to pay out of pocket for your medical bills. Okay, note that when healthy people drop out of the insurance market, this is adverse selection. So what materializes is an oversupply of low-quality bodies in the market, and this all happened because of the asymmetric information. In other words, the insurance company couldn't tell whether someone was sickly on the outset, and so they couldn't choose not to do business with people who would cause them to lose money. Okay, so now let's think about this insurance company and put yourselves in their shoes. If you're selling insurance and adverse selection just occurred, and only the sick people were buying your insurance, then you're in bad shape. So what would happen is for each contract that you sell, you'd be bringing in $10,000. But after the adverse selection, all of your customers' expected healthcare costs would be above $10,000. In fact, on average, you'd be paying out about $15,000 per customer to cover their medical bills. So you would be suffering a loss. Okay, suppose this insurance company has kind of a naive insurance agent, and they realize, hey, I'm selling these contracts at $10,000 a pop, but on average I'm spending $15,000 on each customer to cover their medical bills. Why don't I just increase the premium to $15,000? Okay, if the insurance company did that and they raised the premium to $15,000, then another round of adverse selection would just occur. And this time, everyone whose expected healthcare costs are at or below $15,000 would drop from the market. Okay, as a result of this, the new average expected healthcare costs for the remaining customers would rise, and it would rise to $17,500. So the insurance company is still suffering a loss. Now they're bringing in $15,000 a pop, but they're paying out on average $17,500 per customer. Okay, so maybe this naive insurance agent goes back to his office, he scratches his head, he says, well, that didn't go like I planned, we're still losing money, and now we're losing $2,500 per customer. If the agent wasn't super bright, he might just say, well, why don't we just raise the premium again? And if you raise the premium this time to $17,500, well, now all the people with expected healthcare costs at or below $17,500 would drop from the market. So we had another round of adverse selection, and now the average expected healthcare cost amongst the remaining customers is even higher because now the pool of customers is compositionally even sicker. And so the insurance company is still losing money. So when this happens, what we end up with is just kind of this iterative process where the insurance company increases the premium, people drop out of the market, insurance company's still making a loss, so they increase the premium more people drop out of the market, and we just keep going. All right, if the insurance company just keeps on nudging up the premium, then eventually they're going to get to a premium of $20,000. At a premium of $20,000, it doesn't make sense for anybody to buy insurance because the sickest person in the population has an expected healthcare cost of $20,000. So why would they buy insurance for $20,000? All right, what eventually happens is the market just entirely collapses, and we call this an adverse selection death spiral. What is an adverse selection death spiral? It is simply successive rounds of adverse selection that destroy an insurance market. Okay, if you pay any attention to the news, the term death spiral actually does get thrown around a lot when people are talking about healthcare reform and specifically reforms involving insurance. And that's because a death spiral is a real concern. So the tendency for insurance markets is for things to unravel because, for example, young, healthy people often choose not to buy insurance, i.e. adverse selection. And so the people who are left in the market wanting to buy insurance are often older and sicker, and they have higher medical bills, and so they're more costly for insurance companies to cover. So there's a real tension trying to attract healthy people who have low healthcare costs to buy insurance, so that the insurance company can use these people to cross-subsidize the care that they're having to pay for amongst the sicker people who are very, very eager to buy the insurance. Okay, for today I'm going to leave you hanging here. What we're going to do next lecture is we're going to try to think about how we could potentially save an insurance market from a death spiral. But for today, I just want you to really wrap your mind around what the death spiral is and why we get it. So if you have any questions, throw them out during the question period, and then after 10 minutes, we'll meet back for the exercise. For the exercise today, we're going to do something a little bit different. What I would like you to do is to read a news article that relates to the content of today's lecture and then just simply summarize it. So if you go over to Blackboard, there's going to be an article that is copied straight into the assignment. Read all the way through it, think about what it says, and then after you've done that, write 3 to 4 paragraphs giving an overview of the article and just summarizing the gist of it. The purpose of this is basically to convince you that all the stuff we're talking about is actually relevant and it applies to current events. So once you've written your summary, you are good and you're free to head out and enjoy the rest of your day.